Hey Jeff, how are you? We're
I'm well,
excited to
Ronak.
have
Thank
you
you
on
very
today.
much.
Thank you, and of course, hello to everyone, and welcome to our latest Fireside chat. Uh, Thanks again for joining us today. My name is Ronak Sheth. I'm the founder and CEO of Lit Videobooks. I'm thrilled to be hosting what we know will be an empowering conversation with best-selling author Geoffrey Moore around crossing the chasm and very hot topic today, the disruptive potential of generative AI. So just quickly, a little bit about who we are and what we do. Lit Videobooks is a learning and development platform that makes reading best-selling business and self-help books as enjoyable as watching a movie or a documentary with a new format that we hope you'll love called Videobooks. If you'd like to learn more and want more information and have access to the library, please stay tuned at the end of the chat for more information. Uh, just as a quick overview of what we're going to cover today, uh, we're going to watch a few clips from the Crossing the Chasm video book. So you can see firsthand how we brought a lot of the core concepts within the book to life on screen. And of course, we're going to take a deep dive with Jeff into the disruptive potential of generative AI for businesses. Finally, we'll save the last 15 minutes or so for Q&A, where you can ask questions directly to Jeff and just add them into the Slido link that is in the chat and upvote anything that you really want answered. Um, Jeff, our quick bio does not do you justice, but let me go through some of your
It's
background.
okay. It's okay.
Uh, you are a renowned author, speaker, and advisor, and you split your time between advising startups and working with established tech giants like Salesforce, Microsoft, and Google. Your first book, Crossing the Chasm, has millions of copies in print and has become sort of the definitive Bible for guiding startups and bringing cutting edge products to larger markets. In your work, you've been focusing on the market dynamics around disruptive innovations and the challenges that companies face in embracing these technologies. Could you share with us what you've been working on most recently?
Well, it's interesting. So crossing the chasm has been around for quite a while. But the challenge of crossing the chasm, when I wrote the book originally, we were thinking of startups and how does a startup kind of break into the mainstream market? One of the things that's interesting about this century is it's actually the large established companies that also have the same challenge. They have a huge book of business, but it's a legacy, and they want to catch the next wave. And it turns out it's the same journey from the outside world's point of view. But to make that inside a publicly held company with shareholders who are looking for profits every quarter, and it's a very different management problem. So the last book that I wrote, a business book, is called Zone to Win. It's about how do you zone the corporation to be able to handle those different priorities in a practical way, as opposed to continually, cross talking and getting in each other's ways. And it has been a real problem. We've seen a lot of great companies not cross the chasm the second time and kind of lose their relevance, and nobody wants that. So it's a very relevant book, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, and before we start fireside chats, we usually ask you to give a bit of background on the video book, but since Crossing the Chasm, we've partnered with you to bring it to life in video book form. We're just going to kind of take a look and introduce the video book through a clip. Uh, just quickly.
How to lose a startup in 3 acts. So act 1 is actually a really promising start. You've got product in the market. People are giving you a lot of praise for it. It's still new. It's not quite complete, but it's powerful. People are going, yeah, this is new. This is exciting. And then the next year, you get some big deals because the visionaries are going, yeah, I'm going to take a chance with you because I think I can leapfrog my competition using your technology. And so you get really very big deals. And this is where we go to the Act 3, where we ramp up everything. We spend a lot of money, and we're celebrating way too early, because just at that point, the market actually kind of falls out from underneath of you, and then you start blaming people, and then you fire people when you bring in professional management. You do all kinds of unnatural acts, none of which can help, because you can't force your way across the chasm. You can't spend your way across the chasm. You have to understand the dynamics.
But that was fun. I like
Amazing. Our
that.
team had a lot of fun with the animation with your video book. Um, so Jeff, you waste no time getting to the core of what this video book's all about. Could you talk a little bit about what led you to develop this concept of the chasm?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I joined a company called Regis McKenna Inc., which was the premier high-tech marketing agency in the world at the time. Regis kind of, you could argue, almost invented high-tech marketing. But what was happening, they were incredibly good at like launching new companies and new categories, and they get the cover of the Wall Street Journal or the Fortune magazine or whatever. It was amazing. But a couple of years later, you say, "Well, whatever happened to that company?" And it's like, "Well, I don't know." But we got another company that we're helping now. And so after a while, it was like, "Hang on, stop for a minute. There's something going on here that was sort of structural." And so, in investigating that, the key idea was the visionaries believed what you believed, and they were willing to lean in. And the pragmatists were saying, no, if I need what you have, that's fine. But right now, I'm not sure I do. So we'll wait and see. And that wait and see thing was what created the chasm. And the problem was venture funding says, no, I'm going to give you some money, but you got to give me some results within the time window of this money, or we're not going to get any more. And that we had the timing all wrong.
Right. It's really incredible because I think the book was first written and released in 1991, and it's of course evolved over time now with 3 editions published. But even after over 30 years, the concept still really works. And why do you think that is? How do you think the chasm concepts remain relevant through all of these years?
Yeah, I think it's because the human race hasn't changed that much. So basically, if you say, what is the chasm dynamic? What's going on? What's going on is you're asking people who are not specialists, who are generalists, to make a potentially high-risk buying decision. And it's not just the purchase price of the technology, it's the whole change management effort you're going to take. It's all the disruption you're going to cause, the potential career risk you're taking by sponsoring something that's unproven. There's all these kinds of things. And so when you say and by the way, the visionaries say, yep, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be the first guy in. But most people say, gosh, I'd like to wait and see a few other people do it first. And then when they've done it and they've proved it out, of course I'm going to use this. But until they've proven it out, no. So what they do is they poll each other all the time and they say, so this Gen AI thing, are you using it yet? No, me neither. Is that okay? Okay, good. We can wait for a little longer. Yeah, good. And then at some point along the line, some people start saying, no, we are using it. And you say, really? What for? And they say, well, blah, blah, blah. We'll talk more about that. They say, oh, okay, maybe I could use it there too. And then eventually it's like, you're not using Gen AI? What are you, crazy? And that's like, oh my God, we're behind. And that creates the opposite of the chasm, which we ended up calling the tornado, which is when everybody and his mother is buying it all at once. And that creates a huge boom in the market.
That's really interesting. And I guess 2 questions that are kind of intertwined. So I guess where do you think we are with Gen AI now? Are we in the tornado? Are we in what part of the chasm? And then before we kind of get into the layers, right? How do you feel about generative AI and kind of this rapid transformation that's happening in the world right now?
Yeah. It's so fun. I think Bill Gates taught us something important about things like Gen AI, which is in the short term, we radically overestimate its impact. And in the long term, we radically underestimate its impact. So what's happened right now is, first of all, it captured everybody's imagination with a consumer product. One of the things people should know, crossing the chasm is really much more of a business to business model than a business to consumer model. And it has to do with risk. You tried ChatGPT 4.0, there was no risk. You downloaded it, you experimented. You're using Microsoft Copilot or somebody else's Copilot. There's no risk. So there's no risk. There's no chasm. Okay, so that's the first thing. But if you're a company and you're saying we're going to put our information in AI, or we're going to generate compliance documents with AI, or we're going to detect fraud with AI, okay, now we're back to chasm time. And I would say right now that we're certainly not in terms of business use of AI, we're not in the tornado. We're not even close to the tornado. I think we're probably crossing the chasm right now. People can kind of see where this thing's going to land on the other side. But are they doing it at scale yet? Even departmentally, I don't think yet. So I would say we're probably crossing the chasm, actually.
Wow. And companies are using generative AI in so many ways. Uh, for you, what are the most exciting or kind of forward-thinking ways you're seeing companies utilize generative AI today?
It's actually, I'm going to rephrase that and say, what are the most backward ways they're using it? Because I actually think this is an important idea. Because the question, everybody wants to tell their board they're doing something, right? So what are the simplest things you can do with Gen AI that are lower risk and high productivity improvement? And there's a bunch of things. Basically, it's sort of I'm going to use an AI to do stupid stuff. And stupid stuff is like compliance regulations or helping people reset their passwords or frequently asked questions or stuff like that. And basically the idea behind that is if I get it directionally right 90% of the time, I'm probably doing better than a human. And I'm not going to get sued. And I'm not going to get arrested. I think as you move forward and you start saying, but this could help doctors, this could help lawyers, this could help teachers. If you go the other front, who's doing some of the most exciting things? Sal Khan's doing something amazing. Sal Khan's got something called Khan Amigo, which is an AI tutor for students. We have an educational crisis in this country partially because of the pandemic, where teachers will have a classroom with students that are like 3 or 4 or 5 grade levels apart from each other inside the same class, because some kids made it and some kids didn't make it. Well, you can't ask a teacher to teach to 5 separate grade levels in a group day after day and expect a lot of success. But if you have an AI tutor that says, "Oh no, I'll figure out where that student is, and I'll work with that student at that student's pace," that's a miracle. And so that's sort of I think an early market success. I think kind of the chasm crossing stuff. I'm on the board of a company that's using AI. It's called Work Fusion. They're using AI to address financial fraud detection and anti-money laundering and know your customer and all this kind of things. That's an example. It's high risk, but the problem is it's high risk with people too. And the truth is their AI can outperform or at least can complement. At some point, there's still a human in the loop, but you move the human to the top of the loop instead of trudging along at the bottom of the loop. And so it's a big difference for them. And so I think that there's places that it's being used, along the way. I think with drug discovery, there's probably a big thing there somewhere along the line, but it's still early days.
Absolutely. Yeah, I saw the ChatGPT video with Sal and kind of the AI tutor. It was fascinating. Absolutely fascinating, and I
Well,
think
you're
huge for
in learning
education.
development. Live as a learning development platform. So you guys, this is your world.
Absolutely. Yeah, it got me really excited about the potential of Gen AI when I saw that. And there's a lot of other kind of education oriented folks in the audience. So we have a lot of human resources and learning and development leaders that are here today. Are there any areas where you're seeing these teams kind of effectively use generative AI?
I don't spend as much time. By the way, that's where I started. I was originally an English professor, and when I first went into business, I joined an HR team, and I was sort of a resource manager kind of guy in organizational development. And so I really think that the AI movement is going to be important for this area because we're now post-pandemically, at least in the tech sector where I spend most of my time, there's a kind of a crisis. It's not a crisis. It's a residual layover of lack of engagement, lack of enlistment. How's the remote hybrid model going to work? How do we build teams? How do I develop careers? And again, it's a little bit like that teacher problem I mentioned before. If you're an HR professional, you have some people who are like water walking geniuses who are just going to like race to the top of your organization. You got other people who are struggling and need additional help. And yet they don't come to the office every day, so you can't see them every day. So will AI be able to create a platform for intervening across that spectrum of skills? Yeah, I think it will. And I think we have things like Salesforce has something called Trailhead, which is a great training thing, but you have to have the AI to figure out, yeah, but which one should I be taking, and why is it that Geoffrey is struggling in this one place, and how do we get him over the hump? All those kind of things I think could be incredibly valuable, particularly for workforces that are knowledge work oriented, and therefore their conceptual skills are really important to develop.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of the themes that I've been hearing are, because of all the rapid change that's happening, there's a lot of demand for both reskilling and upskilling employees. And so I'm excited to see kind of what companies pop up in those areas, leveraging AI to kind of personalize that experience for people at different levels, kind of in their careers, right? And knowing kind of as a manager where your team wants to go next, right? And providing personalized access, I think is really challenging. So
it is, and I think one of the things that's nice about AI agents too is if you're talking to an AI agent and you're talking to an AI agent, you're not worried about looking stupid. When you're talking to another person, you are a little bit worried about looking stupid. And the problem is, the key to learning is to be stupid first. I call it sometimes being the first fool. Say something wrong because that's the way to get started towards something right. Well, with an AI agent, yeah, you can be kind of, as dumb as you want.
I love that. I love that. So in the video book, you explained the technology adoption lifecycle. You mentioned some of these, phases initially, visionaries going to pragmatists. And, there's 5 personas that often come with the tech adoption lifecycle. So let's go ahead and play another clip from the video book to learn about, the history of these life cycle and those personas.
Cool.
To cross the chasm from here, Box had to assess their place on the tech product adoption model. The technology adoption model is the framework that explains how users come to accept a new technology product. The first technology adoption model came from the field of agriculture.
The dynamics of high-tech markets were captured back in the 50s by a guy named Everett Rogers, who was actually doing studies of agricultural innovation around special crop rotation ideas. He did these longitudinal surveys in the Midwest. He interviewed a bunch of people, and he built a profile. And the profile says there are 5 personas in the unfolding of a technology adoption lifecycle, and they adopt in sequence. So the first one he called the innovators, we called the technology enthusiasts. But these are the people who are interested in the technology for its own sake. How does it work?
For this group, the product doesn't have to be perfect. They tolerate some bugs and setbacks in order to be ahead of the game.
The next group, he called the early adopters, we called the visionaries. Those are the ones who believe in the possibilities here and who want to be the first mover, who want to get competitive advantage by being the first to adopt something. They're going to leapfrog their competition. They're going to put the other competition out of business. So in the last 10 years, I would say that Jeff Bezos would be the most obvious example of a visionary. In the prior decade, you would have said Steve Jobs, Bill Gates in a prior decade, Larry Ellison in a prior decade.
But most consumers don't fit that profile, and that's why we need to cross the chasm and reach the third and most important group.
The third profile is the one that really matters to the dynamics of crossing the chasm. Rogers called it the early majority. We called them the pragmatists. Pragmatists say, look, if this thing works, I want to use it. But until it works, I don't want to experiment. So I'm going to wait until I see other people doing it successfully.
By the time the pragmatist comes around, the product should live up to its promises.
And we called the conservatives. They're people who are more technology averse. They eventually adopt the technology kind of because they have to, but not because they want to. So they'll postpone it, and they're hoping by the time they adopt it, it'll be less expensive, more proven.
The fifth in the chain are called laggards. They are the most reluctant and skeptical of new tech. High-tech groups tend to write off these buyers, but they are important for longevity of a product.
Okay, I forgot that one. That's really entertaining. Thanks again.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you. Jeff, these are really well-researched identities, again, that have, stood the test of time. Have you seen any immediate changes to these personas in the age of generative AI with, new AI products and features?
Well, I think the first thing is, and I want to state it again, I said it already, when I wrote Crossing the Chasm, 95% of the spending in tech was business to business, not business to consumer. There was some consumer stuff, but it wasn't very much. This century, consumer kind of blew past business and became this incredible phenomenon that's changed our digital lives, right, completely. And so the personas in the consumer world, I think play out. They might play out the same, but it's just different. But staying with the business world, I think the reason why these personas are so persistent is each one has a different decision-making model, and those decision-making models have a lot of history. So that technology enthusiast, they're using analytical, technical decision-making. They're based on just empirical evidence. That's what they want to do. And they talk to each other, but basically they're going to make their own decisions. The visionary is using scenario decision-making. They're seeing a future. They're saying, I could help create that future. And it's an act of imagination, which then becomes an act of evangelism. And so the whole evangelical personality. The pragmatist decision process is, this is above my pay grade. I don't think I'm going to figure this out myself. I'll talk to the experts, but sometimes the experts have their own agendas. So really what I'm going to do is I'm going to check with people that look like me, and I'm going to see what they're doing. And I'm going to kind of stick with the herd. So if the herd's hanging back, I'll hang back. If the herd jumps in, I'll jump in. How's that going to work? And that, by the way, that herd decision making, it works for antelopes, it works for people. It's a pretty proven method. The conservative is going, their decision making is, look, I know I'm not good at this, so I am a reluctant adopter. I know that eventually I will have to, but this is not my forte. And so the longer I can postpone it, the longer I can stay with what we have. By the way, what everybody always forgets is the unintended consequences of this stuff. I'm terrified of them as a conservative. So, I'm going to hold back. But eventually, I love the way the woman in the cartoon woman takes the watch, and eventually it's okay. And eventually the conservative then swears by it. It's like, yeah, I've got this, it works perfect. And then the skeptic really is just saying, no, I'm not going to play this game. So I don't think those decision processes were selected by Darwin over centuries. So I don't think that. I think that's why there's this persistence to the model and the personas.
Absolutely, I think I would fully agree. At least what I'm seeing with a lot of these new products out there. I guess are folks who kind of fall in the tech enthusiast or pragmatist categories more or less forgiving with AI products that are kind of coming out right now. Right. There's been a lot of kind of companies that I want to go in after, but generally, are you kind of seeing that folks are kind of more or less forgiving with kind of new AI products right now, given all of the excitement and hype?
Well, it depends on which folks. Like right now, for example, in our federal legislature, there's a movement to say we need to regulate AI now. Those are conservatives who are saying we're nowhere close to being able to do this thing at scale. So that you get what I would call conservative backlash against visionary toleration. And so the technology enthusiasts and the visionaries are willing to fill in the blanks. They see it as the early days. They want to be part of creating the process. They actually, enjoy participating in that formative stage. And the pragmatists are sitting kind of in the middle going, I have other things I need to worry about first. And so I have to be very disciplined about what I buy into and when I buy into it. And that's not an easy decision for me to make. So with GenAI right now, what the key crossing the chasm is when the severity of the problem exceeds the risk of the solution. And that's what crossing the chasm. In other words, you said the risk of not solving this problem is actually greater than the risk of employing a solution that doesn't work. In other words, I'm running out of time. I got to do something. That's the chasm crossing value proposition, which flips the bit, and where the pragmatist says, well, probably going to get fired anyway. So I might as well get hung for a sheep as hung for a goat. And by the way, it might work. And so then for the vendor's point of view, if you can take people in that situation and genuinely solve their problem, the way the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine genuinely solved the COVID-19 problem, it's like, man, we love you and we're going to stick with you and we're your guys. So that's the key to crossing the chasm is rather than try to be pretty good at many solutions, you take one problem and you super prioritize it and you say, I'm going to be world class at the solution. And that's how I get across the chasm.
Right. And, I think there's a lot of kind of new AI products now that seem to have a challenge of kind of going from visionaries to pragmatists. There's products like Humane, the AI pin that was pretty notorious, and then Rabbit. Do you have any advice for kind of product leaders or founders on how to cross the chasm from visionaries to pragmatists for their AI products?
I think again, so if you look at where the AI is getting the most adoption, at least where in the circles I hang out in, it's as an add-on to an established automated process. So, the co-pilot idea. So there are all kinds of places where, as long as you're keeping a human in the loop, AI is like it's like a very good assistant, right? It's like, hence the co-pilot name. I think that I don't think it's been broadly adopted, but I think it hasn't been broadly adopted because it's just people have got to see enough ROI. They've got to make sure it's okay. I mean, there's a little bit of that. The problem is it's not really a forcing. There's no burning platform that's forcing people to go faster than that. So it's happening in kind of a background stage thing, but it's creating enough awareness of AI as like, okay, look, there's going to be something here, but it's not world changing. So what we want to talk about, of course, are the world-changing things of AI, and those things are all, I think, pre-chasm, because they still require a bunch of extra work. If you are gonna, change the world, then it takes, and like Con Amigo. I mean, think how many classrooms you'd actually have to get it into. How are you going to get the AI in every student's hands? How are you going to get the teachers aligned to it? How do you get the PTA aligned to it? How do you get the State Board of Education aligned to it? I mean, that's a lot of stuff to do, right? Having said that, I think the hope for it is huge. Now, there's also the backlash of the artists, the backlash of the songwriters, the backlashes of the Hollywood script writers, and probably authors of lit video books saying, hey, if these guys scrape our stuff and use our content, what's going on? That's going to be a regulatory issue, and all of those things have to be solved in the mainstream market. And since they haven't been solved yet, we're not in the mainstream market.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the licensing and IP challenge is a huge one. And there's some interesting things that are happening now, with like the New York Times licensing and like Financial Times and some other companies, but others just saying, no, you can't touch our data, right? So it's going to be really interesting. And one other thing you kind of talk about in this most recent clip are visionaries, disruptive visionaries. I don't know if you think it's still too early, but do you have an idea of who you think the visionaries could be in the age of generative AI today?
Well, I think right now, I mean, the Sam Altman obviously got a got a lot of notoriety, a lot of visibility, and I think I think if you say who brought large language modules to the attention of the world, it's OpenAI and those guys. I mean, that was the one that did it. Having said that, the vision, he's almost more of a technology enthusiast than a visionary, meaning it's a little bit like the difference between Mark Andreessen and Jeff Bezos. Mark did Mosaic, and Mosaic created the World Wide Web and browsing. Jeff was the guy who figured out, and that's going to change commerce. In other words, Mark kind of changed the medium, but Jeff changed the world. And there's a bit of that visionary kind of stuff there. So right now, who's going to change the world? I mean, I don't think there's anybody right now. I see lots of possibilities and lots of ideas for changing the world. I don't know that there's a clear somebody already who's like, whoa, this guy's way ahead of everybody else. I mean, the way like Elon got way ahead of everybody else with electric vehicles. Okay, I don't think there's anybody there with GenAI yet.
Yeah, and even in robotics, right? I think it's like still really early. When there's like Figure and Tesla, I forget what it's called, Tesla humanoid or something.
Yeah, by the way, that shows you which side of the chasm we're on. If you don't even have a word for it, you're normally not yet across the chasm.
Absolutely. And so, Jeff, there's one more topic we wanted to cover today. Thanks to the crowd for saying it's Optimus. It's Optimus. So the topic of competition. So let's take a look at one more clip where you and the former CEO of Firefox, Gary Kovacs, break down how larger companies and competition can actually be the key to success.
When you're crossing the chasm, you need competition. The category of tech already has to exist if you want pragmatists to understand it. For example, Google Glass never quite took off with the pragmatists. There was no category or competition for it, which meant no mainstream market.
But if there's no competition, they're going, well, how do I even know this thing works? Now you say, well, no, you can see it's working. It's working here, 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 and here. It's just nobody's ever done it for your industry, for your problem. That's what we're going to do. So actually, competition helps you.
The way that we had and really put together the plan to help the world understand the benefits of Firefox was really in reference to other products that were already out there. Many came from their corporate world, if you will, and so they had an understanding of a corporate browser that they were using. And others were downloading this hot new thing that was coming from another company.
To define your place in the competitive market, you have to adjust your positioning. Positioning is how you describe and present your product to the market.
Cool. I have to say, a big shout out to any of the executives who participated in this book, because just hearing their voices was really, really valuable, because they were the ones who were actually doing this stuff. I was just writing about it.
Yeah, no, it was a wonderful set of interviewees from Microsoft to WordFusion to Box, and I think that a lot of those companies are really kind of at the forefront of AI and kind of how kind of the center of attention in terms of innovation in the AI space. So it's wonderful. If everyone hasn't checked out the video book, please do. And this clip you mentioned, Google Glass, which is kind of interesting. At the time of making the video book, really had no similar items in the marketplace. Now there's a lot of attempted new AI kind of hardware products and technologies that pragmatists might have more of a reference point to, like, for example, the Apple Vision Pro. And what would it take, you think, for one of these products to cross the chasm today? And do you think that there is enough of a market for something like Google Glass to succeed, or are we still kind of early?
It feels like we're awfully early. But by the way, if you notice from the color of my hair, I might be the wrong demographic to ask this question of, right? Okay, because for me, frankly, I still get disoriented and dizzy with these products, so I'm probably not the right guy. But if you think about it, the reason why I don't think that's where it's going to go first is you look at the potential of what GenAI can do to the mass of processes that run the world, whether it's running government, whether it's running education, whether it's running law enforcement, whether it's running a supply chain, whether it's running a marketing program. I mean, in any one of those worlds, think about how much verbal content has to be created and consumed to run just the ordinary processes. And it's all kind of low-grade human activity. And AI has demonstrated if it's low-grade, repeatable human activity, we do it better than humans. We don't do it perfectly, but we do it better than humans. And so that raises two issues. Number one is if you own the process, well, please come on in. If you work in the process and this is your job, you're thinking, well, what's going to happen to me? And that's a very serious social issue because it's obvious that the jobs that we do today will be the bottom half of those jobs are going to be redelegated to GenAI. The top half will not. And by the way, it's not like there's not room to grow. I mean, I don't think the world's going to run out of problems in our lifetime. So I have a feeling the human spirit, if it's willing to engage with the next problem, will have lifetime employment. But to your point about upskilling and reskilling, what you can't do is say, I'm going to be the last fireman on a railroad car, which, by the way, I think has now finally been eliminated like 50 years after there were any fires to have. So this job preservation thing, I think, is a short-term response, which is often necessary, but as a long-term response, it doesn't work. So I do think this notion of watching, and so we have to find a way to embrace GenAI. And it's still, but the regulatory guys still have a legitimate complaint, which is, please, I mean, we don't know where this thing is going to go. My only issue with that is right. And I don't think our legislatures are smarter than anybody else. I just don't have a lot of confidence that a politicized legislature is going to make better decisions than another body. Having said that, though, I get that they're saying, well, but you can't trust these guys. And so we're having some trust issues. In fact, I think trust, I spent a lot of time with Salesforce. Salesforce's number one value is trust, and that they use it in a lot of different contexts, but they certainly are using it in the context of their AI services and making the point that if we violate trust, we're going to set ourselves back dramatically. And I think there will be violations of trust, and they will set things back. And we just have to hope that we can maintain momentum.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really hard to imagine how a legislature can keep up with the pace of innovation in AI, right? And one thing I think a lot of folks in the audience might want to hear is you mentioned earlier in the conversation that a lot of large companies have to cross the chasm as well, so they don't kind of remain laggards with one great product that succeeded. Companies like Google and Apple now, it seems, are trying to cross the chasm again with new products. And these are not small startups, but large companies who are often kind of creating and building new technology offerings. For the many senior leaders in the audience at large companies that are in attendance, what advice do you have for them in this dawn of AI?
It's really important. And I mean, look at like Intel, for example. It's been an iconic semiconductor processor company, and all of a sudden has to deal with AI chips and GPUs and all these kinds of things. And so Pat Gelsinger's taking them across to a new journey, and Satya clearly with the Azure took Microsoft on a whole new journey. So that what we learned, and by the way, the book was written with Satya's team at Microsoft and Mark Benioff's team at Salesforce, and so really smart team, so therefore a pretty good book. So the key concept was this idea of zones, and the notion was that there are 3 zones that need to be managed separately with their own operating model and their own metrics, and you cannot ask any zone to adopt the metrics or models of the other 2 zones. And then there was a 4th zone that I'll talk about in a second, but there were 3 main zones. The first one's called the performance zone. That's what runs your current business. It's what you report out to your shareholders every quarter. It's what we make, and then what we sell, and how we do it. And then that zone is supported by the second zone called the productivity zone, which is all the in-house functions that support you operating at scale. So it's all of HR, it's all of finance, marketing, customer success, legal, facilities, everything. There's probably twice as many people in the productivity zone as there are in the performance zone. And that's probably 90 to 95% of your total population is somewhere in those 2 zones. And you're a 30, 40, 50, $60 billion global company, right? So then the question is, okay, new thing comes along. And if the new thing can be grafted onto the old thing, you can kind of incubate it inside the performance zone and say, well, that's our next generation. Like the next generation CPU at Intel would just naturally be part of that world. But if it's antithetical to what you do, or potentially cannibalistic to what you do, or just involves a whole new ecosystem, a whole new value proposition, a whole new technology, a whole new set of customers, you can't incubate it in the performance zone because they've got a quarter to make, and you can't incubate it in the productivity zone because there's no urgency, there's no entrepreneurship there. The productivity zone takes extra time to reduce risks. And the incubation zone, which is the 3rd zone, takes extra risk to reduce time. So they're like antithetical, right? They have completely different operating models. So setting up that 3rd zone, most companies knew they needed it, but they put it in the productivity zone because it was a cost center. So they were trying to run their incubation zone out of the productivity zone, and they would have process models. They'd have all kinds of stuff. You're like, guys, this is not how you do it. Well, how do you do it? Well, the venture capitalists have figured out how you do this. By the way, they've been doing it for 50 years. And they have a model, and they have an operating model. They have a financial model. You can't use their financial model. You're a public company. It's not going to work. But you can use their operating model. So how do they operate? And the book describes how you do that. So there's a venture capital operating model, a productivity zone operating model, and a performance zone operating model. And the first lesson is just, guys, you need to keep these things separate. And that's not starkly, they kind of get that. The real problem is what do you do when the incubation starts to say, okay, I now want to go big? And now public companies, the eyes get like this, because the problem is I need to spend a lot of money and I'm going to lose it all. So the earnings, and you have no private capital, you have no venture capitalists saying go for it, go big or go home. No, there's no, your public shareholders saying no, I want you to make a profit this quarter again. So the challenge then is, how do you do that? And this is where the transformation zone, this is the fourth zone. And at that point, the CEO and the board and the executive leadership team have to sort of lock arms and say, look, we're going to go through a rough patch. We're going to do something that our shareholders are not going to like. We're going to tell them why we're doing it. We're going to hopefully explain it to them as best we can. And we're going to try to get through this as fast as we can. But things are going to get dark before they get light again. And we're just going to do that. And the companies that do that actually have very, very bright. I mean, Apple did it 3 times under Jobs in 1 decade. It was amazing. Satya did it with Azure. Mark did it with the Marketing Cloud, and now he's bringing AI into the world and things like that. So there are people that do it. Most companies, and what the book was really trying to prevent, was you get halfway in and you go, this is just ugly. And so you kind of soft pedal or pull back or slow down or, marginalize. And what happens is the initiative loses momentum, and it's irrecoverable. Once you lose momentum with a transformational initiative, you can never get it back. And so the companies that no longer exist, the Decks and the Primes and the Lotuses and these wonderful companies, because eventually the shareholder says, well, I'm sorry, but you obviously don't know what you're doing, which isn't fair, but it's just the reality. So Zone to Win was saying, how can you maintain your status as a public company and catch the next wave? And the answer is not easily, but here's the playbook.
I think it's super fascinating. Some people in the crowd want to see this as a video book. So
okay, next one. Okay, boom, boom, boom.
Let's go. And it's really fascinating because I think a lot of companies are spending a ton on AI right now, and the public markets have been, obviously, for companies like NVIDIA, rewarding heavily, and then other companies that are announcing how much they're spending, but it's not necessarily directly attributed to their bottom line yet. They're kind of feeling a little bit of pain right now in the public market. So I think what you're saying is super resonant, I think, right now as well.
Well, and the reason, by the way, the reason NVIDIA gets a pass is because NVIDIA, this is their core business. In other words, it isn't like it's taking away from this super successful prior business. They did have a prior business. I mean, they had the graphics chips for game machines, but this thing is just like, you can throw that away entirely. We just want this thing. Whereas if you're Intel, you still have a huge CPU business that the world wants you to maintain, and they want you now to build these. Now you said you're going to be a fab, so now we also want you to be a fab. A contract, third-party fab, compete with TSMC. Well, NVIDIA's not doing that. So Pat's got a much, much harder problem to solve than Jensen does. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And, they're going back to the topic of competition, there is a lot of competition everywhere you look in AI. Any advice here? There's companies being started every day. When does it make sense to enter a very crowded market?
Well, okay. So first of all, often it doesn't, but you're just passionate about it. You're going to do it anyway. So let's just be clear. But I do think that so when you play this game, if you're saying, look, okay, with a disruptive technology, so I'm entering a crowded market, but it's a crowded early market. It hasn't. We're not talking about entering, the rent-a-car market. We're talking about, hydrogen fusion cars or whatever. Okay. So at the front end. So the first thing then is, do you have a differentiated technology that you think has legs? I mean, it's not only that it's differentiated today, but you have reason to believe it can stay differentiated for a decade. I mean, with obviously with more investment. So that's number one. If you do that, then I think that the early market game you play just kind of the way you described in the video book. It's like, okay, find your visionaries, find your technology enthusiasts. And by the way, you can build your company to $10 million. $20 million. I mean, even with a SaaS model, you can get to something that's it's not yet viable because it's lumpy. The thing about the visionary in the early market is you get these big awards or you get nothing. I mean, nothing that matters. And so that's a challenge. But then I do think the good news about crossing the chasm is the problems on the other side of the chasm, they're problems that the mainstream market does not want to cope with. Because if they did want to cope with them, they would have. So the customer is going here and they're going, I'm kind of stuck here, people. And so but at that point, you have to abandon the fact of, I do this because I'm smart and I love this new technology and I'm going to be a wizard, to, no, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to go, and by the way, there's a very specific Ebola virus problem. I'm going to go deal with it in this industry with these people. And it's not, by the way, I can create a company of $50 to $100 million a year with just one or two of these use cases, but I can't get $1 billion. Okay, in other words, but I can become a real company, and that company will last for decades, 2 decades. I mean, it's a real company, but it'll be like a grape and a bunch of grapes kind of world. If you want to be a watermelon, if you want to convert, I don't know how you genetically engineer a grape to be a watermelon, but if you did, then what you have to be able to say is, okay, no, there's multiple use cases, and I can go from being a solution to being a product and a platform for many applications. That's what I think OpenAI and Anthropic and all these folks are trying to say. We want to be, and there's huge investments are going on, are all about being a platform. And the investments are mostly actually in compute power. If you look at like what the reason why Amazon and Facebook and Microsoft and Google are funding these things is because they're the hyperscalers. And this thing is a hyperscaler problem on steroids. So it's really a challenge for anybody else to figure out how would I play that. And I think that's a very limited game. I think you have to figure out a way to play above that level, because there's only a certain trillions of dollars. I used to think $1 billion is a lot of money, but apparently I just saw that NVIDIA's valuation yesterday passed $3 trillion. And I went, okay, I'm an old man.
Oh, yeah, we have a video book called $1 Trillion Coach, and
okay, there you go. Okay, there you go. Okay, I need to get it.
When we were interviewing Eric Schmidt, he said if we rewrote the book today, it would actually be called $2 Trillion Coach. So it's Bill Campbell who coached the founders of Facebook
Bill,
and Google.
He was
Microsoft.
Amazing. He was an amazing gentleman. He really was.
Absolutely. Well, Jeff, this has been very insightful. Thanks so much for sharing your advice, guidance, and deep knowledge of tech. And I hope everyone can take something away. Before Q&A, we wanted to ask, is there any advice or one thing you would want our attendees to walk away knowing today?
Well, I don't know if it's about advice about cross. I think it's really important to be in service to something beyond yourself, that you are willing to make life commitments in service to. I mean, if you think about, I think that's good for tech, and I also think it's good for the human personality. If I worry about things, it's people that somehow I worry about large companies who revert to their own profit and loss statements as their true north. That's not a good true north. And I worry about individuals who worry about their next promotion or their salary raise or their next thing as their true north. Both of those are indicators, but they're not true norths. And I think the true north is being in service to something that is important enough to you that you're willing to make sacrifices are required to make it successful. And sometimes it's family, and sometimes it's job, and sometimes it's customer or client. For me, a lot of my work, the joy of my work is of my clients. Yeah, that's who I'm in service to. It's really, really fun.
It's wonderful. I love that. If you're open to it, we have a few questions from the audience here that have been upvoted. So the first one, given that crossing the chasm is so well known and well regarded, why do you think companies still make the same mistakes? Are there external factors at play?
Well, first of all, this book's been around for a long time, and there's a whole lot of people that haven't read it and don't want to read it or whatever. It's like, come on, that was an old thing. So part of it's just, I think there is some ignorance that you always have to overcome. But beyond that, it's that business again of where you think you are. Like when you're in the early market, it feels like you might be in the tornado. You even asked me, is GenAI in the tornado? Because there's this enthusiasm and there's this all this rush of noise, particularly if you're inside one of these echo chambers like Silicon Valley, and so you think, oh my gosh, we gotta like the window's closing, we gotta run and jump, and that's a failure mode, but it's an understandable failure mode. The other thing is, the board of directors often recruits people from the mainstream market, and mainstream market models are not appropriate until you're on Main Street. And in fact, it's a little bit like the performance zone and the incubation zone. If you use a performance zone ROI model to govern your investments in incubation, you're not following the venture model, and you are going to screw up. So I think the getting the right framework. I spend most of my time, if you think about my advisory business, it's really just trying to get people aligned on the right framework to get the problem and to get aligned around seeing the problem in the same way. And the failure mode is when they're doing this to each other.
Right. So another question from the audience. Have you encountered a case of a company using AI in a surprising way? And if so, what was it?
Well, I think what's coming up right now, Brett Taylor, who was the CEO at Salesforce, has got a new company, and a friend of mine, Tatya Mamet's got a new company. And they're both talking about AI agents, and the AI agent idea goes all the way back to a video that came out of Apple when John Scully was running Apple, called the Knowledge Navigator, I think it was called the Knowledge Navigator. But anyway, it was a personal agent. Well, we're now at a point where it's like, yeah, not only do we have agents, my agent will talk to your agent. So now we're having like networks of agents, right? And you're going, whoa. And yet you say, well, boy, that sure would cut through a lot of, I mean, think about just, like I wanted to get my global clearance thing renewed. Well, I would love to have had my agent do that with their agent and not have to sit at the San Francisco airport and that kind of stuff. So there's all this, you think that's pretty cool. So I think that's a big deal. But to be fair, though, I mean, for me, I care a lot about the social services sector and the fact that we cannot possibly fund it anything like what the problem far exceeds the funding and the human scope to deal with it. And I'm hoping that we can find ways to use AI to break the back of some of those problems. It'll take a lot of creativity, but I think there's potential there.
It's amazing. And let's see. There's a lot of questions here. So I'm trying to bring a new one. So what is the biggest downside of using generative AI in a business at the moment?
Yeah, well, there's a number. There are a bunch of risk factors. Obviously, one of the scary ones, Samsung very early on, your intellectual property gets out into the public domain that you want to be protected. Even more potentially upsetting would be proprietary data or confidential data of your customers or your partners gets exposed to the public market, and that's it. I think less dramatic, but I think probably more common issue is you get kind of crappy results. Generative AI, like for example, if ask generative AI, what would Geoff Moore say about the following topic? Based on Crossing the Chasm, what would he say? Generative AI will generate you a very plausible paragraph, which will be astoundingly mediocre. It will not be wrong, but it also will not be very right, okay? And so I think the danger in using AI, like, when we're trying to maintain conversations or connectivity with a customer or a prospect or a partner or a colleague, is if we kind of fire and forget, we're going to create pseudo communications, which are going to generate pseudo buy-in. And when that pseudo buy-in is put under pressure, it's not going to withstand the pressure. So, I worry about students. The same thing. I'm using GenAI to write my essay for freshman English paper that's due next Monday. Okay, I get it. And by the way, your teacher probably would give that essay a B minus. Well, I don't think it would give it an A, but I guarantee you they will not give it a D. So so then the question is that B to C kind of mediocrity thing. I worry about that.
So, and one thing you kind of mentioned in our chat is the idea of kind of really becoming world class at one thing if you're a company, right? And really kind of being incredible at that one thing. I guess there's a question here, but I'm slightly tweaking it because I'm curious. Is there kind of like a certain set of skills that you think are really important for people to be thinking about right now in the age of AI? If you were to differentiate, you kind of mentioned there are, skills that the bottom half are going to be kind of automated away or replaced by generative AI. When thinking about the skills that will remain, that will, require a human, what do you think those are? And if people are thinking about this today, saying, oh, well, my job is an illustrator, and there are great tools that are out there that can illustrate way faster than I can draw with my hand, right? I guess, what kind of skills do you think those would be that might outlast a lot of the innovation that is happening kind of in the AI space?
Right. I think what it's all about is moving closer to the efficient frontier of where the imagination and risk still is unframed. So in other words, what AI is good at doing is taking conventional knowledge and applying it routinely and at scale. And so what I see the creative individual doing is saying, look, where I want to use GenAI to take away what's distracting me so that I can spend time on what's attracting me. Okay. And so GenAI, I don't want to substitute GenAI for what's attracting me. I want to do that, and I'll explain why I think I should do that. But there's a whole bunch of stuff I have to do to complete this stuff. And if I can have an assistant that, like, for example, Leonardo and Michelangelo, they didn't paint the backgrounds of their paintings. They painted the figures. They had people in their studio doing the backgrounds, okay? The AI could be like the studio painters, not the Michelangelo painters. So what's the Michelangelo requirement? Well, that's why I said that thing about being in service too. The thing about putting yourself in service to something, and by the way, it should be in service to something that's at risk. So part of this thing's about risk. And it's about, the world needs attention. The world has problems that it can't solve, and it's really struggling with. So you want to find something, as well as opportunities and cool things that are new, and okay, both. But the point is, in both cases, the human imagination and the way we're sort of wired can allow us, and a lot of this is scenario, kind of early market scenario kinds of things, of saying, I see something that I think we could do here. And so that part of it, it's not like AI couldn't come up with a plausible answer, but AI will come up with the least stupid answer. And the problem is, at the beginning, you don't want to be the least stupid answer. You may want to be the most stupid answer. But the point is, you got to care. And yes, I think AI can emulate empathy, but AI is not biological, and and empathy is biological. So I think there's a lot for humans to do with their heart, particularly if their heart can align with their mind. I think that's lifetime employment for anybody that cares.
Well, that is a wonderful, wonderful message to end the chat. Thanks so much, Jeff, for sitting down with us today. It's really been a pleasure. And before everyone goes, a couple last items. If you haven't done so yet, check your registration confirmation email for complimentary access to Crossing the Chasm video book. We hope this chat made you excited to dive in and watch it with a new perspective. And check out our Videobooks LinkedIn page. We're going to have more fireside chats coming up. We're going to be hosting Lisa McLeod, bestselling author of Selling with Noble Purpose, tying into a lot of really making sure you're focusing on selling with heart, right? And adding value. And generally, if you're interested in learning how Lit for Teams can ignite engagement and micro-learning in your organization, you and your learning development or HR team can access Lit for free. So just go to our website. There's a Lit for Teams section, and you could just submit information to learn more. And finally, thanks so much, Jeff. Really appreciate you joining, and hope you and everyone here have a great week.
Well, thank you, Ron. It was great to have time with you on the show. Thank you.